The restaurant buzzed with the usual evening crowd, elegant lighting, murmurs of conversation, and the soft clinking of glasses. Among the staff was Amara, a 27-year-old waitress with calm eyes and a poised manner. She carried trays gracefully, her posture perfect, her smile steady. Few knew that behind her modest uniform and quiet nature was a mind sharpened by years of study. She had once dreamed of being a translator for the United Nations, but life had taken her down a different road. That night, she had no idea that one arrogant man was about to test not her patience, but her brilliance. The man entered with the confidence of someone who believed the world belonged to him. His name was Victor Kane, a 40-year-old millionaire investor known for his sharp tongue and lavish lifestyle. He wore a tailored navy suit, gold watch, and a smirk that rarely left his face. He sat at the best table without asking, snapping his fingers for service. Amara approached with her usual warmth, pen and pad ready. "Good evening, sir. May I take your order?" she asked politely. Victor's eyes narrowed, not because of what she said, but because of who she was. He leaned back in his chair, a mocking smile spreading across his lips. "I'll give you $100,000 if you can serve me in Chinese," he said loudly, making sure nearby tables could hear. A few guests chuckled awkwardly, others looked away. Amara froze for a second, feeling the heat of humiliation rising in her chest. She had heard remarks before, but this one cut deeper, not for the money, but for the tone dripping with superiority. Still, she refused to let anger cloud her grace. She looked him in the eye and asked softly, "Would you like Mandarin or Cantonese?" The smirk disappeared from Victor's face, replaced by confusion. "Excuse me," he muttered. Amara straightened her back and began flawlessly reciting the specials of the evening in perfect Mandarin. Her pronunciation was smooth, natural, every tone precise. Guests turned their heads, murmuring in surprise. The air shifted. Victor blinked several times, unable to process what was happening. Amara continued, her tone calm, professional, and proud. When she finished, she switched effortlessly to English again and said, "That will be your appetizer, sir. Would you like your wine in French or Italian next?" The room erupted in soft laughter and applause. A couple at a nearby table clapped discreetly. Someone even raised their glass to her. Victor's face reddened, his arrogance slipping into embarrassment. You speak Chinese?" he stammered. Amara nodded with the same serene smile. "Among others," she replied. He leaned forward, curiosity finally replacing mockery. "How many languages?" She paused, meeting his gaze without flinching. "9, she said simply, "including the one of respect, the one money can't buy." The words hung in the air like a quiet storm, sinking into everyone's conscience. Victor's posture softened. The smugness that once defined him seemed to fade as he realized how small he must have looked a moment ago. He cleared his throat, muttered an apology, and ordered quietly in English this time. Amara nodded, took his order, and walked away with the same calm dignity she had when she first approached. But this time, the room looked at her differently. The same people who had once chuckled now whispered words of admiration. It wasn't just about her knowledge. It was the way she carried herself, the way she chose grace over anger. When she returned with his food, Victor couldn't meet her eyes. He tried to make small talk, perhaps to repair his image, but Amara simply smiled politely and went about her work. As she turned to leave, he reached for his checkbook. "You earned it," he said, sliding a check across the table. She glanced down, 100,000 signed. The entire restaurant seemed to hold its breath. But instead of taking it, Amara placed it gently back on the table and said, "You can keep your money, sir. Respect is payment enough." Then she walked away, leaving him speechless. After Victor left, the manager approached Amara with pride shining in his eyes. "You handled that perfectly," he said quietly. "Not everyone could have stayed that calm." She smiled modestly, saying, "Sometimes silence teaches louder than anger." Word of the incident spread quickly through the city, not as gossip, but as a story of strength and dignity. Within days, a news outlet picked it up. The headline read, "Waitress humiliates millionaire with brilliance and poise," but Amara didn't seek fame. All she wanted was to go home, call her mother, and tell her she'd stayed true to herself. Weeks later, Amara received an unexpected letter. It was from Victor. Inside was no check, no apology filled with grand words, only a note. You taught me something money never could. I've started funding scholarships for language students in your name. Thank you for opening my eyes. For a moment she just stared at the paper, her throat tightening. She folded it neatly and placed it in her apron pocket. The man who once mocked her had changed, and not because she fought him, but because she showed him a mirror of decency. That evening, as the sun dipped below the skyline, Amara stood by the restaurant window, watching the city lights flicker on. Her reflection stared back, not just a waitress, but a woman who had turned humiliation into honor. She smiled, whispering softly in Mandarin, "Kindness is the strongest language." Behind her, the murmur of the restaurant carried on, but inside her, there was a quiet pride. She hadn't just won an argument. She had rewritten a story, one that reminded everyone watching that respect, not wealth, defines true greatness. A few months passed, and Amara's life began to change in quiet, meaningful ways. Customers who had seen the viral story came to the restaurant just to meet her, not to gawk, but to thank her for reminding them that dignity still existed in the world. Some brought gifts, others simply shared their stories of facing prejudice and staying strong. Amara always listened with patience, offering a smile or a kind word instead of sympathy. One afternoon, a young student approached her, a shy boy of 16, holding a language textbook. "Miss Amara," he said softly, "I started learning Mandarin because of you." Her heart swelled with quiet pride. She knelt to his level and told him, "Every word you learn is a bridge, not a wall. Keep building." That moment, more than any check or applause, felt like true success. As winter came, Amara found herself reflecting on how one small moment had rippled into something far greater. The story of the multilingual waitress had inspired people far beyond her city. Schools invited her to speak. Community centers asked her to teach language basics. And local media began calling her the voice of quiet strength. Yet she remained humble, still serving tables, still greeting every guest with the same warmth. One evening, she stood outside the restaurant, watching the snow fall under the glow of streetlights. A memory of that humiliating challenge flickered in her mind, but instead of pain, she felt gratitude. Life had tested her dignity, and she had chosen grace, and in return, grace had chosen her back. One evening, as Amara was closing up the restaurant, a familiar figure appeared at the doorway. Victor. He looked different now. The sharp arrogance in his eyes was gone, replaced with a quiet humility. He was dressed simply, no expensive watch, no entourage. For a moment, they just stood there in silence, the soft glow of the overhead lights falling between them. "You probably don't want to see me," he said, his voice low and sincere. Amara wiped her hands on her apron and shook her head. "People change," she replied calmly. "Sometimes it just takes being seen for who we are, not what we have." He smiled faintly, his eyes moist. "You taught me that," he said. "And I'm still learning." She offered him tea, and for the first time, they spoke not as waitress and customer, but as equals, two people who had learned the language of respect. They sat at a small corner table, the same one where everything had begun months ago. The restaurant was quiet, lit only by the soft amber glow of hanging lamps. Victor wrapped his hands around the warm cup of tea, his voice calm and reflective. "You know," he began, "I used to think fluency was about speaking perfectly. But you taught me that true fluency is in how we treat others." Amara smiled gently, stirring her tea. "Words can impress," she said, "but kindness translates everywhere." Outside, snowflakes pressed softly against the glass, blurring the city lights. It felt poetic. The man who once mocked her now sitting in gratitude, listening instead of talking. For Amara, it wasn't victory she felt, but peace, the kind that comes when the world finally makes sense.